Good afternoon. Welcome to our How to Utilize SharePoint Online as a Headless CMS webinar. This is actually a fairly new one for us. We had actually a couple of scheduled previous ones when we were going to go for it. We're dynamically creating the content and the website to go through this together, so we had to delay it a few times. So for the folks that had registered for the earlier ones, hope you can still join us here today. For the folks that only got the notification the end of last week, welcome, and we'll dive right in. Sorry, Logan, Amanda, I want to confirm that we're actually recording on here. I don't see an indication on. Oh, I think we are. Yes, we're good. Awesome. Okay, so let me dive right in. So intros first, Peter Carson here, President of Extranet User Manager, also an Office Apps and Services MVP, and my contact information is here. Like I mentioned, we are recording the session. We're going to post the recording up on the website afterwards. We'll be posting a copy of the deck as well, so you'll be able to get all this content through here. What I'm going to do before we go further in, I'm just going to turn my camera off just so that people have a bigger view of the screen that I'm working with there. So that should be coming through fine now. Okay, so in terms of agenda, what we want to cover off for today, we've done the introductions, and we're going to dive right into what is a headless CMS. It's kind of an odd name. We've got some funny graphics to play on that, but really, we're going to explore what that means from a technology agnostic point of view, and then we're going to dive into a specific implementation of that using SharePoint Online as a headless CMS, and I'll explain why that can make sense and what we've done around that. We've got some cool things around Teams list support that comes into that as well. These days with everybody working remotely with COVID, it's Teams for anybody that's in Microsoft 365. So it's kind of interesting how we can leverage that as part of the content authoring experience. And then getting into the actual publishing process. You've got all this content in your headless CMS. Sorry. How do we leverage that and actually publish that out, either to an Azure website, to a staff portal, even leveraging that content from an email marketing point of view. We do have the live event Q&A open on the side here. So if you do have questions we're going through, please feel free to answer them. There is a little lag as I'm talking. I think there's about a 10 or 20 second delay with the Teams live events. So I may not be able to answer live as we're going through the Q&A, but we've got our team on the line as well. They'll be watching the Q&A and answering questions, and if appropriate, we'll pause to address some of those as we're going through as well. So without further ado, let's just dive right into things. So let's start with the background on what is a headless CMS, and the idea here is that you really want to separate your content from how you present it. So the idea is that the content repository, the body, is separated from the presentation layer or the head, hence the name a headless CMS. And really the idea here is, content's just content. How you're going to ultimately present it is independent of that. And often you're going to want to leverage that content in a number of different ways. And if you do a good job of separating the content from the presentation, you're able to then leverage it for lots of different ways from that point of view. The obvious one that we're going to be focusing on is your public-facing website. But beyond that, can you leverage that content, say, for your staff portal or for a vendor portal? A common scenario that we see when we're building public websites, or even if a client has an existing CMS for their public website and we're deploying a intranet, say on SharePoint Online inside of their 365 tenant. You want to be able to leverage that content, and ideally you don't want to duplicate that content. You don't want the communications team at your organization to have to publish one way to put it up on the public website and then publish it another way to get it on your internal staff portal. And you also don't want your staff to have to go to two different sites. You want it all together there on their staff portal. So being able to leverage that in different ways, other ways from there, maybe you've got a mobile app that you've created that you want that content to be consumed on, driving out to social feeds, things like HubSpot, where you can push it out to different social networks, or even presentation devices, working with school boards and organizations where, maybe they've got pixel boards or TVs in public or event spaces that you want to push that content out to. You can repurpose that content if your content management system is well designed to abstract that presentation from the content itself. And that's really the goal here. The other thing that that I didn't mention on here is just change in technology direction. You know, technology changes all the time. The web is changing all the time. It's improving. There's new standards. There's new frameworks to build things, and you can decouple that as well to say, you know what, we're building a website today, but 3 years from now we might want a different architecture and a different way of presenting that. Maybe even a different branding on that content from an organizational point of view. You know, you can do that without having to throw out and completely migrate all of your content, because it is separate in that content repository. So this kind of expands on that, the idea that we've got a single source content strategy. I like to call it a single version of the truth. It's really about keeping that content in a single place, and then that content gets pushed out to multiple different endpoints. And as I mentioned, the decoupling and the technology decisions helps a lot on that as well. This is a quick diagram of our extranet publisher product. We're going to be talking about this in this context, because SharePoint Online itself is not a headless CMS, but it is a great information architecture and content management tool. So we're kind of combining that together to say, let's take the best of SharePoint, and let's build a tool that publishes that out, you know, either to our public website, to different places from there. So the concepts that I'm going to be talking about here are for the most part agnostic of our product, but we're going to use that as an example of how we actually build this and pull this together. So let's talk about SharePoint Online as a headless CMS. And if we go back in time, if you go to our envisionit.com website, which is our sister company, we have 2 brands operating under our corporate entity. Envision IT is our consulting organization. Extranet User Manager is our independent software vendor products side of the organization. The Envision IT website is still built on the old version of Extranet Publisher, which was not a headless CMS. It was very much leveraging the page authoring capabilities that were in SharePoint Online. And if anybody's familiar from sort of SharePoint 2013 forward, the ribbon that we see here, the authoring experience that we have here, you know, this is the classic publishing model in SharePoint. Microsoft's kind of gone away from this, not only for public websites. You know, they don't support public websites on a SharePoint Online platform out of the box, and even from a on-premise SharePoint server, they've kind of moved away from that from a recommendation point of view. But what we had done is we said, you know what, let's leverage the classic publishing model and provide a rich content authoring experience right in SharePoint Online. And this was advantageous when our clients were still using classic, say, for their intranets, and their communications team were familiar with this kind of interface, could work with it. As that's moved away more to the modern side on the communication sites in SharePoint Online, you know, people have gotten used to the much simpler, cleaner approach of the modern, but that doesn't lend itself well from a content authoring point of view. That's not really the right tool for pixel perfect type of public websites. So the challenge that we had here in continuing to use the classic approach is that it is very tied into the presentation. You know, we've built master pages and page templates and layouts and such, so that the authoring experience and the published page is very much the same. But we had some challenges with SharePoint Online. You know, I loved this editor interface when it came out back in 2013, in SharePoint 2013. It was a big step forward from SharePoint 2007 and 2010. But it's starting to show its age. You know, the weird things that it does in terms of mashing up your HTML that you put in there, not letting you do things in like inline scripts and styles and such from there, are really limiting from a content authoring point of view. So I wanted to decouple that and say, you know what, let's separate the authoring, the presentation, and the content repository. So what we've done is said, okay, well, let's just use SharePoint Online as the content repository. And why would we want to do that? You know, we could use a database, use any number of things to manage that. But the reality is that SharePoint's really good at a lot of things. You know, stuff like version history, approval workflows, tagging, metadata, you know, having different views and lists and such through there really help a lot from that point of view. So let's leverage all of that and then decouple out the presentation tier and even the page content authoring piece of that. So I've got a couple different diagrams that I'm going to take you through here. So let me start with the information architecture. So if you're familiar with working in SharePoint, IA or information architecture is a big part of the planning process, and it's something that we do right at the very beginning of the project before we even get to wireframes or creative designs or implementing anything in SharePoint. And this isn't unique to SharePoint. This is an exercise you should go through in any sort of website project. So what are the things from a content point of view that we want to be delivering on our website, and how do we want to organize that? So I'm going to start at a high level here. So we've got our content repository website. So this is SharePoint Online, and these represent different lists or content types that we've got in the site. And I've kind of separated it in 3 different blocks. So on the left are the things that we use for Extranet Publisher itself. So it's got some lookup lists for things like Rollups, what libraries it's using, some formatting, different page templates that it has, some breadcrumb support, and I'll go into those when we get deeper into the design side of it and what that looks like. On the right-hand side, we have the actual content that's going to be published out. So we have web pages, but we've also got images, we've got documents and downloads, we've got roll-up images that we do some specific image sizing for web optimization and page speed optimization. And then we've got a couple lists down here that support the process. They're not part of the publisher specifically, they're actually part of the website. Things like being able to tag different pages by industry, by people, by solution type. That's where SharePoint really shines, is that idea to attach site columns and metadata and build that out from that. So let's dive a little deeper into the pages, because that's really where the meat of the website is. So I come across, let me actually zoom a bit out. It's going to get pretty small to read, but I'll zoom into specific areas from there. So SharePoint has this concept of content types and site columns, which is really good for building out and implementing your information architecture. And it's hierarchical. You can have content types inherit from other content types, and that's exactly what we've done here. So if we come in and I zoom in on our base page, so this is our sort of our root content type that we've built the site around. What are the things that we want to know about a page that we're going to be publishing? Well, every page should have a title. It should have a file name that becomes part of the URL. It should have a template that defines what type of content it is. The breadcrumb we're actually using to drive where it appears in the site. So what path and friendly URLs do you want to have in there? And I'll show you what that looks like. We do a lot of roll-ups. We've got events and news articles and resources and case studies and such. We want to be able to roll those up, and I'll show you how we build that. We want to be able to tag the pages to say, here's the roll-up content and the roll-up image that we want to see in those roll-up areas. There's, of course, the page content itself. That's the meat of the page. And there's the hidden things like the meta description and keywords that you see, in the Google summaries when you're doing a Google search for your content. That shows up through there. And there's links to the published URL as well as the authoring URL. So those are all what we call site columns in SharePoint that are associated with the page. But then we've got a bunch of pages that inherit off of that. So let's take, for example, the article page. So it gets all of those metadata, all those site columns that the base page has automatically, because it needs all the same things. But then it adds things that are specific to it. So an article has a product tag. We have a number of different products on our Extranet User Manager website. We want to be able to tag it to one or more of those so we can highlight it in those areas of the site. We need an article date for rollup so we can show them in date order. We have bylines, so tagging people who wrote the articles. We've got some CRM integration that I'm going to touch on. We've got certain articles that have gated content that ask you to fill out a form before you download it, and we actually wire that into our Dynamics 365. And we actually target this content out to multiple different sites. So when I read an article on the Extranet User Manager site, I can say, well, cross-post that to the Envision IT site, or to my blog site, or to our staff portal in SharePoint Online. And by tagging it to those sites, it'll actually publish out to those other sites. So that idea of a single version of the truth, that we can write it once in here and surface it up in multiple different sites, both for external and for internal purposes. And we've got different types. We've got product releases that have release information on them. We've got case studies that are tagged to things like the industry. We've got events like this event here today, that have event dates and speakers like myself. We've got news articles, again, with product tags and news dates. So, building out this map of what your information architecture looks like is a really important step before you even get to wireframing out the functionality of the pages, or bringing in the creative designers to put the pretty skin on that and what that looks like. Now we do have one other here, which is called email, which seems a little weird. I'll get more into that a little later, but basically we're using this to manage email content like page content. So it's this idea of being able to repurpose content for multiple different purposes. So the emails that you got last week, yesterday, as a reminder for this event, were actually authored in here, and the body of the email was actually the page content, the subject was in there, and it's all tagged in through that as well. So again, that idea of leveraging the content in multiple different ways through there. Okay, so let's actually switch over and look at the underlying, what does that look like in SharePoint? Now this isn't where the content authors are typically going to be working, but it's the repository where all that content is stored. So if I come to my site contents, if you're familiar with SharePoint Online, we've got all our different lists and libraries in here. And all those things that I was showing you in the diagram before, the gated content, the breadcrumbs, the pages, they're all just lists and libraries here in SharePoint. You can see that we've got 316 pages in the pages list. So let's actually have a look at that list. And again, not normally how you'd be looking at it, but actually this view I still find useful from an exploration point of view. One of the big things is that we can define different views in SharePoint. So if I want to say, well, I just want to look at events pages that we've got going on, I can apply that view, and I've now filtered it down, and we can see, here is our webinar today's page. And we can see that, it started at noon Eastern time, goes until 1 o'clock. It's tagged to the extranet publisher. It has a file name, it has a title, it has roll-up content and image, and I'll show you in a minute where that looks like on the page itself. And actually, if I click into that and I say, hey, I want to bring up the full metadata for that, or I click the edit link over here, again, not normally how you would edit it, but I want to kind of illustrate the concept here. We've got the page template assigned to it. We've got a breadcrumb assigned to say, hey, I want this page to show under the resources/events tree. Here's my roll-up content, and here's the actual page content. So it's pretty ugly to, not only am I in a tiny little box here, but it's actual raw HTML that we're showing in here. So I'll show you in a minute how we improve on that experience. And again, we've got all the various different lookup lists, like that roll-up that says, where is this getting published into the resources events? That's just another list in SharePoint here. So I can come up here and say, I want to look at the roll-ups, or, sorry, I'm not seeing the breadcrumbs. There it is. It's actually breadcrumb that I wanted to see. So this is where you define all those paths. What do you want to see in the breadcrumb list? What's the URL of that particular spot? And what's the hierarchy? How does it roll up from there? We've got /products, products extranet user manager. We've got the resources tree. You're basically defining out the structure of your site. And the nice thing is it's very easy to reorganize your content. You say, well, I want to move this set of pages into a different parent. I just change the item in here, and boom, all those pages are moved on your site. Now, be cautious when you're doing things like that. We did an exercise. We actually just launched this new site at the end of last week. And we spent a lot of time looking at the URLs on the old site versus the new and mapping them across and making sure that we have proper permanent redirects up on the site so that Google sees that, hey, this page that used to be here is now here. So we hang on to our page rank and our SEO optimization. So there's things you need to be aware of as you're doing that, but it does make it easy to do that sort of organization. So let's go over to the site itself. I'm going to use a couple different versions of the site for demo here. This is actually our dev version of the site. It's the one that I'm going to be using for demonstration purposes. I don't want to be doing authoring on the live site that you see out, but they're actually synced. We refreshed them and got them both with the same content earlier today. So if I come down through the website here and say, hey, I want to go to the events roll-up, and this is an example of a roll-ups part of the site. And what we don't want to have is the content author having to maintain a page like this. Tomorrow, today's session will no longer be an upcoming session and it needs to move down into the past. We want that to happen automatically. And that's all done using some client-side script on the site itself. So we use the metadata that's on the SharePoint side to build out this list, and we have rules that say, hey, is December 15th before or after today? Do I need to show it in the upcoming or the past section from there? And these pages just automatically update from that. And that's the beauty of leveraging the metadata. We haven't fully implemented all of the things on there, but the idea is as I come to different product pages, for example, you recall that today's event was tagged to this product. So we still have some more work to do. It should show up as the top event in here, being tagged to this particular product, and articles that are tagged to the product. So you can repurpose that content in a lot of different places on your site just by properly designing out your information architecture and putting the appropriate tagging in from there. So what about the content authoring? I mentioned that you're not going to want to go through that SharePoint interface and edit the raw HTML. And we kind of went back and forth on this a little bit. We said, well, you know what, we can build sort of an authoring experience that ties off of the SharePoint Online that's separate from the website. And then we decided, you know what, why don't we actually bring the page authoring into the website? I know it breaks some of the rules of a Headless CMS. We're mixing content authoring and presentation, but it made a lot of sense in terms of providing a nice experience to do that authoring. So this is, you'll see a slight difference in the URL here. There's a -CMS. So it's a separate part published out site that actually has the authoring turned on it. I think it is a dev site, so I think it restarted just before the webinar, so it's taking its time coming back up again. We'll give it a minute to finish up. There we go. So we've got all our content. We've got an editing ribbon that we've added on the top here, kind of like SharePoint. But what we decided was, you know what, we wanted to make this best of breed. Let's separate out the authoring from the presentation and from SharePoint and choose best of breed that we want from there. We're still going through that process. So if I come down to today's event in here, so I'm seeing it right now as a site visitor sees it, but if I hit the edit button up here, we flip the page over, and we're actually using an editor called Pharella. We're getting a warning here because we're still got the trial version up here. I actually just got the license keys from them before the webinar. I was pushing them early this morning because we did a purchase last night. But we're still doing a deeper evaluation of this. And the beauty of the solution is that, maybe you don't like the Pharella editor, you want a different rich content editor in there. It's quite easy to swap that out and put something else in there. Basically, this is just some HTML that's getting inserted in around the published content, allowing us to manage that. Now, I'm not going to edit this page here. I don't want to mess up this particular content. But let's go back to that initial test page that I have, because that's kind of my sample one that I've got going. So I've got a page here. Now, I want to give you an example, just a little tips and tricks of one of the things that we've discovered to make it easy to move content, not into this, but kind of into any CMS from a cleaning up of content point of view. And what I did was, I don't encourage you to do this, but I just wanted to grab some public content. So I went out to the Globe and Mail site and said, hey, here's an article that's interesting here on small online initiatives. So let's just copy this content. Now, I find pasting this content right into a CMS generally doesn't work well. You end up getting a lot of style tags and things from the source site that you don't want to bring across as part of that. So what I tend to do, and it's funny, we used to strongly encourage people not to do this in the early days of SharePoint content publishing, but it's actually improved a lot. I can paste that content into a Word document here. And if I come down to this little tooltip that shows up, and I say set the merge content, it basically cleans up all of the styles. So we've kind of removed all the globe styles and we put it to standard. If we look at this here, it's just tagged to a regular normal tag, SharePoint content through there. I did want to show off the pasting a picture across. I was having some grief with that. Let's give it a whirl though and see how it works. Now, I definitely want to still keep the byline in there so that I'm not breaking any copyright. I want to have the reference back to the globe from that point of view. But let's just copy all of that content that we've now got here and come back to our authoring page. So we had our edit here. I delete all the content that I've got, and I'd literally just do a Control-V paste. Pharella's nice. It recognizes it's coming from Word. If I do this clean, it'll actually take out all of that formatting through there. So actually, if I look under the hood in here, I can do a code view on this. Now it looks kind of weird. So what Pharella has done when it puts in an image, it's called base64 encoding. It's actually put the binary data of the image right into the page content. And it works. It will actually publish to your site and render as an image properly. It's not best practice from a content authoring point of view. You really want to remove this, upload the image separately to your images library and put a reference to it so it's properly cached and delivered through your content delivery network and things like that. But we'll leave it like this just for simple examples at this point here. But you can see, that's just a regular paragraph tag and a hyperlink for the byline. If I get far enough down past the image here, I'll see the rest of the content. If you're familiar with HTML, this is actually really nice, clean HTML. And we've got a couple of HTML encoded text in there, but that's normal. We've got clean paragraph tags. We don't have any styles inline, which makes it really easy to leverage this content in different places. If you've got a lot of inline styles in your content, that's mixing the presentation in with the content. You don't want to be doing that. You want the content to come out as clean and raw as possible, and then whatever styles make sense, whether it's on your mobile app, on your website, on your staff portal, they'll apply and inherit and work from there. Okay, I was having some grief just before when I was demoing this. I was actually doing some changes, bad me, like an hour before the webinar, so we'll see if this works. But basically, when I hit the save button here, it's going to post that back to Extranet Publisher. And under the hood, actually, I'll show, we'll see if it actually works for us or not here. We're actually using Logic Apps, and no, that failed for me. That's too bad. We can give it a try again and see if that works. But basically, what's happening is when I save from here, it's actually calling a Logic App, which is a workflow, and it's posting that content back into SharePoint. Actually, if we look at the details in here, we can see it's a fairly simple Logic App. It says, hey, I'm going to get a request from the authoring site with the new content. I'm going to update that item in SharePoint. That's the piece that's not working properly for me right now. And then I'm going to call Publisher. It didn't get to that because it failed on this step here, and actually publish that page out so I see the results from there. So what I should have seen is this page refresh with the new content in there. And if I was back on the publish site, so if I look at my pages here, we can't actually see the history on that. I was playing around with this just before. So if I say, okay, well, let's look at modified recently, this is where the power of SharePoint comes in handy. I can see there's my publisher test page. I did successfully do it 31 minutes ago, so it did work just before the session from that point of view. And we've actually built some of those connections in here. So if I want to see things like that version history, I can actually click this link here, and it takes me over to SharePoint, and it can see all of the changes. In fact, you can see the 1148 version had the full copy of that article in there. In 1155, I took it out just to prep for the webinar. And we can capture comments as part of this. You can roll back to previous versions through here. So you've got all that capability of SharePoint through there. And likewise, when we're here, we can say, hey, I want to edit the metadata. Longer term, we want to expose that right in this authoring experience, just as another panel. For now, we just link it over to the edit page, and you can actually update all the metadata in here. So if you want to say, hey, I want to change the title of this page or its URL, any of that information. I don't encourage playing with the HTML in here. It's a little awkward to work with in here, but all the other metadata fields make sense from there. So like I said, still a work in progress. We're pulling all this together as we go with launching out the new site and bringing that together. So the goal ultimately is to surface all of that through this experience here. So when I do the edit metadata or the version history, I actually see it in a panel right in this page here. And that's the other beauty of SharePoint, is building those kinds of integrations. It's quite doable for us. There's APIs that Microsoft provides, and we can hook into their system from that point of view. I've been demoing for a while here. There's more things that I want to show off, but I just want to come back to my slides and just make sure I'm still on track here. So we've got the information architecture that I showed you there. Let's talk about the Teams list integration. This is kind of a cool thing. So let me go over to my Teams client. So I've got a number of different identities I'm logged in through here. So this is the one I want. Nope. We're going to get to that survey a little bit later. Let's come here. So I'm just going to launch out my Teams in the browser just because I'm using my main Teams app for the actual live event presentation. It doesn't play well to go back and forth through there. So this is actually our real live Teams. This is not a dummy Teams. This is the one that we do our business with, and we've got it organized into our different departments and teams and client sites for different clients and such through there. And one of them is our marketing team, and the EUM website. You can see we've got the three different sites here is where we're doing all the activity. And you'll actually see a lot of chatter back and forth as we're getting ready. You know, here's the link for the survey that Eric gave me at 11:54. Nothing like just-in-time development here, which is great. Thank you, Eric. But we've got tabs in Teams that we can point to different things. So we've got our files tabs, which is not, you know, the actual files on the website. These are the sort of internal collaborative working documents that we're working on as part of this channel conversation that we're doing. You know, and we use Planner from a task management point of view, so we can see the different tasks that we've got in there. We use OneNote, but if we come over to the right here, I've added in some other tabs here. So this is actually pointing to the document repository in SharePoint. So these are all the documents that are available up on the website. So if we want to upload a new document for the PDF for this presentation that I'm doing here today, you know, you could actually do that right through Teams by just uploading it in here and then updating the page through the CMS to point to that new document that's now published out through there. I can open it in SharePoint if I want to see it in the SharePoint experience, because the reality is that, you know, files and documents in Teams aren't really in Teams, they're just pointers to SharePoint. And then recently Microsoft's announced Microsoft lists, and particularly Teams integration with lists, which are really just SharePoint lists surfaced into Teams, much like documents. So I can come over to events here, and right within Teams, I see all those same events. Here's our current webinar going on in here. You know, I can do the same thing I'd do in SharePoint, where I can click on that item, I can decide to edit it, you know, update all its metadata, do all those things. I actually like this view that Teams give me better than the SharePoint view, because rather than having one narrow column, it's putting into a multi-column. I can see a little better the metadata through here. Again, a bunch of this stuff I probably wouldn't want to change through here, but certain things, you know, meta description, the title, things like that would make sense to update through here. And I still have all the full power of the SharePoint views through here. You know, I can come over to a different view through the tabs here. You know, Microsoft gives you lots of different choices on how you do things, but I can actually use the view picker right in Teams and say, hey, I want to go look at case studies. You know, here's a list of all my case studies. And this is all pointing to that live website that ultimately publishes out to the public website. So it's different ways for different folks in terms of how to manage that and how to work with that. Now, we haven't turned on content approvals yet. Actually, we're not going to on our site, but I want to get a demo environment together showing that. So, you know, you can build out the out-of-the-box approval workflows to say, hey, you know, Andrew's our main marketing person. As he's working on a piece of content, he can get it where he feels it's finished. Mark it as submit for approval. That can go to Logan, who's our sales and marketing manager, can come to myself. You know, we can have a look, send it back for feedback if we need to, or approve it, and then that workflow can mark it as published, and it goes up onto the website there. So all that ability to have content approval and approval workflows, we can use Power Automate or Logic Apps and get more sophisticated with that. If we have more complex workflows, maybe certain parts of the website need to go to certain groups and other ones go to different people, you know, you can build all of that logic in your workflow as part of that process. And we really get to leverage the power of SharePoint for doing all that. So let's keep going through the deck here. So we've talked about publishing that across, you know, and we've touched a little bit. Let me go a little deeper on the technology side of what's happening. So we've looked at the content repository website. That's what I was just showing you in Teams, which in fact is under the hood in SharePoint. It's the various different lists and libraries that drive that. And then from a tech point of view, what we have is a publisher API and a web job. So these are deployed to Azure. I'm not going to go too deep on the technical in today's session. That's one of the questions for future sessions. But basically, they reach into SharePoint, get those changes in that content that's getting published out through there, and then they push it out to the CMS website. And if it's ready from an approval point of view, they push it out to the public website from there. The API is actually wired directly in, so when I edit an individual page, that page immediately live gets updated and pushed back out so you can see the result of your change. The web job runs on a scheduled basis. It says, okay, let's just make sure everything's up to date and current from that point of view. And when something gets approved from a workflow point of view, let's push that up onto the site from there. So we've gone through the content repository. We've had a look at the CMS site, and we've looked at the publishing side of it. So if we come back to the extranet publisher part, you know, what's actually happening through here. You know, basically it's publishing the documents and images out. It doesn't do any translation right now on those. We do have some backlog stories on our product backlog around resizing of images. I mean, that's a really important thing. Often content authors aren't maybe necessarily paying the best attention to the size of images they're using. It really hurts you from a page speed and page rank point of view, from an SEO point of view. So you want to take care of that. We can do that. We can have the publisher actually look and say, oh, you're using that image and it's only 150 pixels wide on your website. Let's make sure it's not a 6,000 pixel 4 meg image. Let's resize it as part of the publishing process. For the web pages, it's a little trickier. There is actual HTML translation. We're taking the raw content that's in the Headless CMS over here, and we're mashing it in with, this is a .NET Core website that we've built in Visual Studio, so building it into the format that works with that. Now, you don't need to build it that way. That's part of the beauty of the solution, is you pick whatever technology stack makes sense for your organization as to how you want to build that out. We also build it's called a sitemap.xml. This is really important for discovery of pages. So Google, Bing, all the search engines will use this to discover the pages on your site and crawl them from a search engine optimization point of view. So we build that out automatically for you. You don't need to maintain that. And then the roll-ups and the related images, I was showing you on the events pages. So if we come back here for a second, actually, let's go out to the live site. I think I have that here. So if I come to my resources page here, this is an example of roll-ups, and the metadata is defining things like the dates and the titles and the images and the content roll-up that's showing in here, and ultimately the page behind it. That's all defined once as a content author, and they don't need to maintain the article page. And then we can start to leverage it in interesting ways by, surfacing tagged articles on product pages. We've got plans to build a much richer resources page that allows you to filter by those different tags and kind of explore our content through there. So that whole roll-up piece is an important part of it. How it's actually built on the website is up to you. We use a technology called Knockout. It's been around for quite a while. Basically lets you take JSON data, so that roll-up data, and mash it up with a template and build these roll-up pages like this. So if you want to change how this is organized and what goes where on it, it's very easy to modify the template. And the beauty is you don't change your content at all. So we're not building content specific for this style roll-up. We're building the roll-up the way we want to present the content that's authored once. It's a really strong point around that Headless CMS concept. And that we're actually using this. We haven't moved our envisionit.com site into the latest tech. Extranet User Manager, our first website, that'll be on tap for the new year to tackle the Envision IT website as well. So let's look at some other examples, leveraging content from an email marketing point of view. So I mentioned the emails that you get as part of the event that we're having here today were actually authored through this experience as well. So if I come back to my excuse me, authoring site here. Actually have a hidden URL in here that we don't publish through the nav, but it shows us the email content that we've got up on the site. And here's our webinar for today's webinar. If I click on that, it's like I'm editing a page, but this one has been designed specifically for use in an email. So what we're putting in the body here is what's going to go in the body of the email itself. So if we come back to our logic apps, again, sorry, getting technical here for a bit, but if we come over to our event registration, each one of you, when you register for today's event, triggered this workflow. I'm not going to show the details of it, but I will show the steps of the workflow itself. Basically, when you fill out the form on our website, it does a call into this logic app and triggers this flow to start working. And basically what we're doing, we've got some integration into our Dynamics 365. So we're looking you up to say, hey, do we have you as a contact or as a lead in our CRM? If yes, we want to attach it to you. If no, let's create a record there for future from that point of view. And then at the end of all that, we're going to create an event. So we're actually not sending an email, we're sending a calendar invitation. But the invitation subject and the invitation body are actually coming from what's entered on this page here. So it makes it very easy for Logan, for Andrew that are building this content out. They don't need to geek out and get into things like logic apps to do this. They just author the content in the site, say this is what I want to have on my calendar and get sent out to people, tag the page appropriately to use that, approve it and publish it, and it's good to go. And the Logic app just picks that up and says, oh, somebody just registered for this event. That's the body and subject that I want to use. Create the calendar invite, email it out to people, away you go from there. And record it all in Dynamics 365, so we've got it all tracked from that point of view. So it's kind of an interesting way to leverage it and pull it together there. There's a couple other things that I wanted to show in here, particularly from an integration perspective. So, we've gone through obviously a big rebuild on our site as we've moved all our content from our old style of keeping it in classic publishing pages in SharePoint to this lists architecture. I won't kid you, that was not a simple exercise to go through that process. I mean, we're a technical organization, so we got to use some of those technical chops to help with that. We wrote some PowerShell scripts that grabbed the content from the old site and migrated it across to the new one. We did a fair bit of work to map the URLs and make sure everything was right from that point of view. And where we made conscious decisions that we were going to put content in a different place in the new site, we made sure that there was redirects so that any of the PageRank and Google Rank came across as part of that. One of the things that was hugely valuable to us in doing that is a third-party tool that we use called SiteImprove. So let me just come over to SiteImprove here. So it does a lot of things. It looks at our site from a quality assurance point of view, so things like broken links, spelling errors, all that kind of stuff. They basically crawl your entire website. So they use that same sitemap.xml that Google and Bing use to crawl your site. You sign up for their service, you point it at your website, they crawl it, and then generate all these reports out from there. It's still a work in progress. We've got a number of things to do. It does not just from a QA point of view, from a AODA accessibility, we've got some more work to do there. From an SEO point of view, we've been very focused on the quality assurance side. So if I dive into QA, the main thing we've been focused on is things like pages with broken links. So we've still got a bunch of pages in here that we're fixing up, so we're kind of working through this list. This first page looks really bad with 45 broken links on it. It's actually a page that we created for the migration process, and basically what it has on it is a link to every page on the old site with the old URL through there. And we did that because we wanted to make sure, do we have a new home for all of those? And the ones that are highlighted out through here, for the most part now, we've decided, you know what, we're okay with that. We don't need a redirect. We don't need an alternate for those. We're abandoning a number of pages through there. But there's a lot of pages that we found through that process that we did need to put redirects in, or we needed to tweak the URLs that we were publishing on because we got a slight difference in how we published it. So it was instrumental in terms of tracking that down and working that through. And then the other pages, if we come down into those, we say, okay, let's look at the archived events here. We've still got a couple of images that haven't come through as part of that. So if we look at this event here, I can actually click on this. That's where it's trying to take me to. Okay, that image is not there, it's missing. So let's have a look at the page itself. So if I open the page, the nice thing with SiteImprove is it actually shows me a visualization of the published page, and it shows me exactly where that broken link is on that page. And then we're able to do integration from our CMS into SiteImprove. So this edit in CMS button here will take me over to the content authoring site, right to that page. Now this is a Rollup page. Remember, we were saying that, hey, you don't want to actually directly edit this page. You want to go fix the Rollup image on it. We've actually already fixed it. We just haven't recrawled in SiteImprove. So that image is now coming through properly through here. If I was to edit this particular page, it would be as a developer, not as a content author, because actually all of that content disappears because the client-side code doesn't run here. And if I look under the hood into the code, it's a little techy to see here, but basically we've got our own Rollup language. We're saying, okay, I want to create a Rollup where dates come after the event start date, because this is upcoming events. So that's the filtering that happens automatically for us. We want to sort it by the event start date. Actually, we need to flip this around. It's supposed to be ascending. We want the most recent one rather than the furthest one out to the top. So we got to fix that. And we want to use the event start date as part of that. And the actual content type we want is just events. We don't want articles or news items and things coming in through this. And this actually defines how it then gets presented. So, how do we want the hyperlink, the title, the image to show in here? If we want to change it around, we just change this template and the content rolls into that and fleshes out from there. So this isn't so much a content author thing to update, it's more of a technical person to update. But the nice thing, again, you can change exactly how your rollups work. If I go back to the non-edit view, and boom, some JavaScript runs, renders that template, and we get our content going through as part of that. So it's a pretty cool way of doing it. Okay, I mentioned I was going to come back to this form, and I want to give people a chance to go ahead and fill this out. So Logan, if you can announce this out through the Q&A, and if people can go to their Q&A, we don't necessarily have to do it live right now, although I'm curious as we're going through the session. Feedback is always appreciated as a speaker, particularly in these live events. I don't get a lot of feedback, so I don't know how people are finding the session. I'd love to get a rating back from you on the content here. This is a brand new session for me, so it's always a little rough around the edges, but I think it's for the most part hung together and worked well. There were a number of topics that we can go deeper in through here. So, I showed you a little bit of the integrations that we've done with Dynamics 365, with SiteImprove. We didn't touch on the MailChimp, but we do use MailChimp for the outbound marketing. That's wired in with the website and with Dynamics 365. And also Teams events, this event itself, how are we integrating that into the process? So I see that potentially as a whole topic right there. Actually, Eric, if you don't mind right now, if you could just go in and edit and republish the form. I should have caught this before. These should probably be checkboxes because I'd love to see if people are interested in more than one of these. The second piece we didn't really touch on, but the idea is that this is not just a public site. You can actually sign in through our Extranet User Manager product. There's a whole registration process that you can go through as part of that and build a digital community around that. So, whoops, right, I'm on the dev site. I shouldn't be doing that there. So what's your interest in that side? Are you more interested in anonymous consumption of your content, or are you looking to secure some of that content down? And honestly, this is where a lot of our focus tends to be. And then if you want to geek out with me and let's go deeper on the Azure side, the app services, the logic apps, the .NET Core website architecture, how that's all hung together, even how we leverage things like DevOps and pipelines to build that, I can certainly go deep on that side. That's always an interesting topic as well. Maybe a different audience. That's why I didn't want to go too deep on it in today's. And then want to be respectful. If you're really excited about what you see and you'd actually like to get going even before the holidays, go ahead, check it off. Logan will figure out how to get in touch with you over the next couple of days or maybe into the new year. If you want to be left alone, you just want to information gather, but you're not looking for a follow-up call, that's okay. Just say not right now, and we'll respect that from that point of view. We'll keep sending you invitations for future events, but we won't harass you from that point of view. So go ahead and fill that out. So just on the wrap-up side, I think we're actually going to be done a little bit early. That's okay. Wasn't sure how the timing would work out on this. So from a summary and wrap-up perspective, so first and foremost, SharePoint Online, not just online but on premises. So we've worked with SharePoint since 2001. So we're almost at the 20-year mark with the product, and it's always been really good at document management, about information architecture, about metadata tagging. So leverage that. Make that part of your content structure. Think about the IA stuff that I was showing you. If I just go back to, where did I have that? I've got way too many windows open for demoing. Sorry here. Oh, it's actually the window I was right on there. Sorry. Yeah, so this IA side of things, really think about how you want to structure that and then how you can leverage that from a SharePoint point of view. And then this idea of separating the presentation from the underlying content repository really opens up however you want to build that from a technology stack point of view, both now and in the future. If you want to change that decision later, it's very easy from that point of view. I've tried to keep the product plugs to a minimum. I mean, Extranet Publisher obviously is a part of this solution here. It really provides the link between the two there. You could build this yourself. Honestly, from a pricing point of view, we're very public. It's all up there. It's not an expensive product. $250 USD per month subscription. Away you go from there. So something to think about from that perspective. So from there, let me just go back to the live event. Logan, if you want to unmute, I don't know if we've got any questions in there that we want to have a look at. So will the slides be available? Yes. We've got the forum there. Does EOM work with Azure AD protected content? You know, the user has to log in with Azure AD. Absolutely, yeah. In fact, that content authoring site, we secure that with Azure AD. But then when we get into the publish site, you could choose to federate that yourself. You could use Azure AD B2C or B2B to authenticate it. You could use our extranet user manager product. So really, you've got lots of different choices. It's how you want to manage that from that perspective. I think that was it for questions, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was all the questions, Peter.
Oh, sorry, no, we've got one more additional one. Let me just publish that out without an answer, just so people can see it. So it was, how does this model support enterprise websites with complex IA? You know, hundreds of subsites, thousands of pages, many content authors. I have been thinking about that. I mean, our website, obviously 300 odd pages, is not that complex. One of our biggest case studies on the previous version of extranet publisher is actually Ontario MD. Now their site still isn't into the enterprise IA, but they do have different portions of the site that are managed by different teams. They've got business groups that manage certain parts of content, and then they have a communications team that manages other part, and they've got different workflows, you know, which needs to go to the business first before it goes to the communications team and such. So we've built that structure out in there. You can definitely separate that content. And I was thinking about, you know, from an IA point of view, what would that look like? And it can be done in a number of different ways. I mean, you could create subfolders under a single pages library and secure those so that only certain groups of content authors can author certain areas of the site. You could say, you know what, I'm actually going to create different content source sites, like actual different communication sites with this architecture deployed out to it, and have those published to a single common one. So the architecture is really flexible from that point of view. It can definitely accommodate a lot of different scenarios there. Most of our client projects do involve enterprise integrations. The Ontario MD one, for example, has integrations into home build apps that they've built internally that are Linux hosted in Azure. It also integrates into web services on the Ontario Medical Association, which is their sister agency's side. We've got a number of ongoing projects right now that are integrated in with SAP from a content publishing point of view. So in one example, as manufacturing jobs are going through engineering design, they come out of SAP as a drawing package that gets published out to the site through Publisher, and workflows and email notifications happen around that so that customers can sign off on that, and then that drives processes back into SAP from a shop floor automation and manufacturing point of view. So yeah, there's a lot of crazy scenarios that you can dream up in here, and the way we built out the architecture really lends itself well to those sorts of situations. So happy to get into a one-on-one conversation on that if you want to go deeper on that. I always love, this is my new favorite tool. It's called Sketchboard, and building out these information architectures. I'm actually presenting 3 different client architectures today. It's kind of a busy day on that exact topic. So happy to do that. So I think we're good there. We'll do a wrap. Want to thank everybody for joining us, and have a great rest of your day. Like we said, we're going to be publishing the PDF version of the presentation up on the event webpage. So we'll send a note out when that's available, and then the recording will also be available. So, oh, sorry, 2 last questions that just came in there. Is the subscription per user or a flat monthly rate? It is absolutely a flat monthly rate. So if you come over to products and extranet publisher on our website and into pricing, it's just a flat $250 USD per month. Doesn't matter how many content authors, how many pages, the size of the site. We're thinking about updating this and maybe putting a page count, different tier pricing. So jump in now. We've got the 1 tier from that point of view. We can absolutely help with the rollout implementation. The Envision IT side of the business, the consulting side of the business can certainly help with that. We also often work with partner organizations. So if you've got a development partner that you're comfortable working with, we're happy to work with them as part of that as well. So again, thanks everybody. Have a great holidays, and hope to talk again soon. Bye now.